Now at Verizon, we have some big news for your peace of mind. For all our customers, existing and new, we're locking in low prices for 3 years guaranteed on My Plan and My Home. That's future you peace of mind. And everyone can save on a brand new phone on My Plan when you trade in any phone from one of our top brands. That's new phone peace of mind. Because at Verizon, whether you're already a customer or you're just joining us, we got you. Visit Verizon today. Price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.
Find home wherever you roam at Sonesta ES and Simply Suites. Stretch out and enjoy home-like amenities for however long you need. And when you're a Sonesta Travel Pass member, staying at Sonesta ES and Simply Suites means earning points toward free nights, upgrades, and more. Go to Sonesta.com and book your stay and unlock their best rates with Sonesta Travel Pass. Here today, roam tomorrow. Join now at Sonesta.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello and welcome to mini episode number 454 of Real Life Ghost Stories. And I have 3 spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from the 12th of March 2025. And story number 1 comes from Heiðdís. I have a goblin story for you. I even made a sketch of how I remember it. In October, when I saw Jordan Ashley's TikTok about how she was followed by a goblin, I nearly died. What she was describing was almost exactly the same as what I was seeing when I was 17 and 18 years old. I live in Iceland, and I've never heard of anyone seeing anything like this, so listening to her story was shocking. I've never known what to call it either, but goblin seems very fitting. In the year 2000, when I was 17, my best friend and I would spend hours walking around the cemetery across the street from her house. We would walk around and look at the gravestones and search for the oldest graves. One evening we found the grave of a child who died in the 1800s, and we stopped by it and sat down for a while. There was a small, broken stone crucifix lying on the moss-covered grave. We were dumb kids. So dumb. We took the crucifix with us to her house. I can't know if that's why things started happening, but it would be a strange coincidence. Almost immediately, she started experiencing sleep paralysis, and we would often hear unexplained noises and smell smoke and foul garbage. One time, she woke up to a loud banging on the bathroom door. She described it as very fast, but so heavy that it was like a whole body slamming against the door in each bang. I believed her, of course, but I was sceptical and thought she must be having vivid nightmares. I often spent the night at her house, and we would both sleep in her bed where she would experience the sleep paralysis. One night, I felt it. We were both still awake and chatting, but all of a sudden she froze. I asked her what was wrong, and she whispered, "It's on me." And that's when I felt something move on top of the duvet. I still don't understand how I did it, but I just felt so protective of her, so I kicked it, and somehow we managed to fall asleep. A few days later, I spent the night at hers again. We were awake and chatting when I saw its face in the dark. It was almost as if it was glowing a little, or reflecting the moonlight of its pale skin. It had a small, pale face with an ear-to-ear grin, tiny teeth, and no eyes. Jordan described her goblin having empty sockets, but mine had tight slits where eyes should be. It was just there, next to the bed, looking at us. Again, my protective instincts kicked in, and I didn't tell my friend what I saw until the next day. That was the point of her taking the crucifix back. She returned it to the old grave. That didn't change anything. We would still hear noises, see things moving, and feel something touch us. One time, a tea candle exploded in her oil diffuser. This thing eventually seemed to follow me home, and I had gotten so afraid that I could no longer sleep in my own bedroom. I always slept in the living room, and even though I couldn't even see into my bedroom, I still had to keep the door closed because I just felt something in there. Things would disappear for days or weeks and then reappear in my bed. One evening, I was getting ready to sleep on the sofa, and I had to enter my bedroom to get my duvet and pillow. I backed out of the room, half closed the door, and reached my hand in to turn off the light. And as soon as the light went off, it jumped at me. The same exact thing I had seen grinning at my friend's house that night months earlier. I slammed the door closed and stayed awake almost until morning. For the next few nights, I would hear faint scratching on my bedroom door, and it kept me awake every night in a pool of sweat. Then one night I saw it running out of the kitchen and disappeared behind a wall. I don't know what happened, but after about a year it was just gone. Things stopped moving, sounds stopped sounding, and I got less and less anxious with time, and I never saw that little thing again. After that TikTok story, I was terrified for weeks, just waiting to see it again, but thankfully I haven't. We've been having some trouble in our new house though. Things keep breaking down one after the other, but that is hopefully a coincidence. It's an old house and all of that. So firstly, I would like to apologise, Heiðdís, if that's actually not how you pronounce your name. I did look it up. I googled it to see, and I wasn't entirely sure, but I hope that I got it right. Secondly, obviously, I will post the picture of this monstrosity on Patreon, Facebook, Instagram. If you don't have any of those platforms to be able to see the picture, it is in fact a monstrosity. And very similar to what Jordan saw in her Goblin story. And I don't know what it is about Goblin stories, but they absolutely petrify me. When it got to the part of the story where you were like, and every night I would hear faint scratching on my bedroom door, Heiðdís got into his litter tray and started scratching, and I nearly threw myself out the window. I got such a fright. Is it a coincidence that you took the crucifix and then all of this stuff started happening? I kind of feel like yes, because, and the reason I think that, right, is because from what I know about goblins, fairies, you know, those sort of entities, they're not affiliated with any sort of religious context, you know, and they're not really associated with the dead. They sort of just exist in their own right. So is it possible that you and your friend, I don't know, for whatever reason, this goblin just saw you guys and went, oh, yes, something to harass for the next year or so? I also think it's incredibly interesting that you saw her sleep paralysis. Do you know what I mean? Because we always talk about sleep paralysis as being, you know, it's not paranormal, it is something that is psychological, etc., etc. But you're chatting and then you ask her what's wrong and she says, it's on me, but you feel it on top of the duvet. And I do enjoy the fact that you kicked it off. I was watching War of the Worlds last night, the one with Tom Cruise, and there's a bit where he kicks a man in the chest, and I was kind of like, oh, I'd like to give that a go someday. But does that mean that these goblins, these entities can, you know, be invisible at will? And the fact that they have no problem showing themselves to people really scares me as well. I'm so glad that it disappeared from your life for whatever reason. I hope that it is not back, because I am now petrified. And like I said, I will post the picture on Facebook, Instagram and on Patreon. But you look at that picture at your own peril, okay? And story number 2 today comes from Jennine. My best friend and I are sort of spoopy ladies. We like going to cemeteries, trying to get EVP readings, etc. We also sound record when we are out and about. I'm more into horror and true crime, but she is more into spiritual things and other dimensions, etc. But we both believe in, well, the Fae realm. I believe that there are many more types of creatures out there that we get glimpses of before they shift back into their own dimension, but I digress. It was on one of our EVP outings in a certain cemetery that I had a very weird experience. We were walking along the headstones, leaving a coin here or there, leaving a piece of candy or a little toy on the children's headstones. We were going to a newer section of this one cemetery. I was looking at a section where the entire area was one family. They had a unique last name. I knelt to read the name of the family out loud, or at least try to pronounce it. As I was kneeling there, my friend said, Jenna, look where you're kneeling. I stopped and looked around and realised that I was in a huge mushroom circle. It was huge. It encompassed the entire area of that family's section of the cemetery. I got a little freaked out as I had been told you should never enter a fairy circle, and I had absent-mindedly walked right into one. I looked up at the walking path not far away. I was figuring out a way to not step on any headstones or any mushrooms. As I looked over across the path, the ground was blurry. You know when it gets really hot and the pavement looks like it's wavy? That's what the grass and the ground and the flowers and trees looked like. But it was only about 65 degrees out, and the area was very shady and no pavement. Suddenly I had this feeling like when you drive quickly over a dip in the road and your stomach sort of flip-flops. That's what my stomach did. And I knew right away that I was seeing a passage. I'm not going to say portal because I know how Emma hates that word. I was seeing a passage into a fey realm. I got up and carefully made my way back to the car. I tore off a piece of fresh croissant that I had just purchased for breakfast, and I had some little half and half creamers, so I brought one of those as well. I laid the bread and the cream at the base of a tree closest to the wavy ground area. I was saying, I'm sorry if we disrupted your area, we are leaving, please enjoy the cream and the bread. We got back in the truck and we left. When we were on the road, headed back home, my friend took the sound recorder out of her pocket. I had forgotten that we were recording ourselves. We pulled into a parking lot and listened to the recording. It was just wind blowing gently. You could hear our voices as we greeted some of the headstones. Then you can hear my friend say, Jenna, look where you're kneeling. And then I think I say something like, oh crap. Suddenly there is this voice. It was high pitched. It was like playing a record way too fast. I couldn't understand it at all. If we had better sound equipment, I would have loved to have slowed it down. But I tell you, it was not wind. It was not a tree, a bird, a bug, or an animal, or any other thing from this side of the passage. I know what I heard. And when we listened to it again, my stomach did that same weird thing that it had done in the cemetery. Our husbands had stayed at the house and had breakfast while we were out being spoopy. We played the recording for them. I thought for sure my husband was going to call me a loony, but after the little voice says what it says, I was looking at him and he said, sounds like fairies. I was blown away. I had no idea he believed in the fae. The next thing he did was get me some iron coffin nails to put on a necklace whenever we go out, accidentally attracting the fae again. And also, he put a little nip of rum in the car to offer them for the next time. I'm going to say this now because otherwise I'm going to forget, but there is a book out at the moment that is called Irish Fairy Forts, Portals to the Past. And it is a collaboration between a man called Richard Mills, who is a photographer, and he's photographed these beautiful fairy forts and fairy rings all around Ireland, and a woman called Jo Kerrigan, who's a folklorist. And I've seen her interviewed about this book. I haven't read the book, but I've seen her interviewed, and the way she talks about fairy lore and the folklore of the fairies is just gorgeous. She has this respect and reverence, and it's honestly, it's a joy to watch her. Her name is Jo Kerrigan. So if you're interested in reading about fairy forts and the history behind them and why fairy forts and fairy circles are so important, that's probably a good place to start. And as Jennine said, you don't go stepping into fairy forts. No. And a fairy fort or a fairy circle, it's not necessarily sometimes they're really big, sometimes it's trees that are in a circle, but other times, like in this story, it might just be mushrooms in a perfect circle, or flowers, or a darker patch of grass that's in a perfect circle, and you don't go stepping into those fairy forts. I remember my grandmother telling me that when she was a child, she accidentally took a stick from a fairy fort, and her mother made her not only bring the stick back, but say a lot of prayers to keep them safe from the fairies. And you guys know, there's lots of things that I will take the piss out of. There's lots of things that I will laugh about. But the fairies is not one of those things. And let this be a lesson for people who do end up accidentally stepping into a fairy circle. Food and something sweet. So whether it's, milk, honey, bit of bread, just an offering to say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And for the love of God, do not take anything out of that circle with you. And the fact, Jennine, that your body responded in the way that it did, the fact that your stomach did that weird flip-flop, the fact that you looked up and you were like, everything's blurry and it all looks a bit wavy. Oh, I would be freaked. And you best believe they were watching to see how you reacted. You best believe. So I'm glad that you had wherewithal and you were able to go, okay, I need to make some sort of offering here to atone for what I've done. And the fact that you picked up garbled, high-pitched voices on that sound record is pretty incredible. And you know what? Big up your husband for being skeptical, not being a believer, and being like, I am still going to get you an iron coffin nail in order to keep you safe. Because if people don't know, fairies don't like iron, and it will keep you safe.
Now at Verizon, we have some big news for your peace of mind. For all our customers, existing and new, we're locking in low prices for 3 years guaranteed on My Plan and My Home. That's future you peace of mind. And everyone can save on a brand new phone on My Plan when you trade in any phone from one of our top brands. That's new phone peace of mind. Because at Verizon, whether you're already a customer or you're just joining us, we got you. Visit Verizon today. Price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.
From coast to coast, unlock adventure at Red Lion Hotels by Sonesta, where restful sleep, friendly service, and local knowledge await. Whether for business or pleasure, spend less and make more of every trip. When you sign up for the Sonesta Travel Pass, you'll get their best rates instantly. Go to Sonesta.com to book your stay and unlock their best rates with Sonesta Travel Pass. Here today, roam tomorrow. Join now at Sonesta.com. Terms and conditions apply.
And our final story today comes from Baerna. I'm a 26-year-old English student from Switzerland. Little information beforehand. Switzerland is not necessarily a spooky country. No one really believes in anything supernatural, and if you do, you'll be regarded with that typical Swiss side eye. However, Switzerland is full of folklore and fairy tales. Now, onto my experiences. Ever since I was a small child, I felt like there was something or someone around me. My grandfather, my mum's father, died a year after I was born. I never really got to meet him, but my grandmother and my parents would tell me that he was my best friend when I was a baby. We would take naps together on the sofa with me on his chest, and go to the zoo together or play with building blocks. After he died, my parents would tell me that I would be giggling and laughing when I was alone in my crib, and I would always fall asleep immediately at night, like I did when I napped on my grandfather's chest. I also have experienced someone calling my name. I didn't feel scared as it felt warm and protective. I believe that he is my guardian angel in times where I need someone and don't have anyone. Due to me being sensitive to these things, I hear and see things that others don't. When I turned 13, it got incredibly difficult to ignore these things and it drained my energy. So my mother asked her friend, who is a medium, to help me manage these sightings. I had some meditation sessions with her and managed to control this gift, or whatever you want to call it. However, during these meditations, I've had some strange experiences. Let's start off with the more positive one. My grandmother used to have a partner who sadly passed away due to cancer. I've only got to meet her once, but during this meditation session, she came to check up on me. I was in an empty space. White walls, wooden flooring, and a white infinity above me. There was no sound, no smell, nothing. Suddenly I felt something, like someone was watching me. I turned my attention to that direction, and as clear as day I could see my grandmother's partner peeking around the corner and looking at me. I stared at her, and she smiled back at me. She didn't speak, but she simply raised her hand, waved at me, and then disappeared around the corner. When I came out of my meditation, I was crying. I believe she came by to see how I was doing, or just to say hello and goodbye one last time. The more terrifying experience was during another meditation session. We were led through a meditation where we had to walk through a hallway. Strangely enough, no matter how hard I tried to follow that guided script, what I saw was drastically different. The hallway in front of me was like one in an old Victorian building with dark wooden floors, candle holders and a red long carpet. The walls were lined with old portraits and the light was warm but dim. Suddenly the hallway started stretching more and more, and it didn't seem to stop. I tried to find an exit, but there was none. That's when I noticed this terrible dark presence behind me. I knew I shouldn't have turned around, and to this day I still wonder if what happened next wouldn't have happened. So I turned, and I felt my heartbeat quicken almost instantly with fear. Behind me was a woman. She was pale, almost grey, wearing a long white dress and had long black hair. The best way I can describe her is like Samara from The Ring. I couldn't see her face, but I knew I didn't want to. She took a step forward, and that's where my fight or flight kicked in. I started running down this endless hallway, always looking back and seeing that she still followed me. But while I was running, at full speed, she just walked slowly, and still she came closer. I was yelling for help, a feeling of dread filling my guts as I desperately tried to reach the end of this infinite hallway. She was still behind me. I finally saw a door, running up to it and trying to open it, but it wouldn't budge. I kicked and screamed, trying to escape this creature when I felt her. She didn't touch me, but the energy was so heavy and thick I felt it. I turned around and sunk to my knees, pressing myself against the door and trying to shield my face, while she leaned down and moved closer until she was on my height. That's when the medium pulled me out of the meditation. I was panting heavily and sobbing, and the heavy feeling of that creature's presence vanished in an instant. Without me having to tell the medium what happened, she simply put her hand on my shoulder and said, "She won't hurt you. She's not dangerous. There's nothing for you to be afraid of." After that, I decided to work with the medium as I felt safe around her. She taught me how to read tarot and how to use bones for fortune telling. One time she had a woman come into her shop for a reading. The woman was probably in her mid-30s with 2 small children. The medium asked me if I would like to do the reading, and she would sit next to me and help me if I needed it. So as I was preparing the cards, I started to feel something. There was an energy standing behind this woman. It was sad and dark, but it also felt warm, like it was filled with love for the woman and the kids it was attached to. When I started laying the cards, I saw it. A man standing behind the woman. His eyes were hollow. His clothes hung strangely on his very thin and abnormally stretched body, and his neck was bent in a very unnatural way. Suddenly, it was like I had one of those flashback moments they have in movies. I was in an attic. It was dark and dusty, and I walked towards a chair that stood in the middle of the room. There was a flash, and I saw the same man hanging there. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Once again, the medium pulled me from this strange state, and I looked at her. She spoke calmly and quietly as she told me, "That's her husband. Would you like to tell her, or should I?" It took me a while to regain my breath, but I ended up telling the woman. She started crying, asking for forgiveness, and how she felt so guilty that she didn't notice he was struggling. I felt that he wasn't angry with her, but at himself. He stuck around to make sure she was safe and that the kids were safe. He regretted his decision, but he was now watching over them from the other side of the veil. I've also had some experiences without the medium present. 2 of these happened in my home. A 150-ish-year-old workers' building from back in the day where my part of the city was the chocolate factory area. I've always been a nerd and never liked parties, I still don't, and would rather have my own parties at home. So one of these nights when I was 15 or 16, I turned on the small glowing disco ball I had, put on a Lady Gaga CD in my CD player and started dancing. I was singing along to the music, jumping and dancing, when suddenly I made eye contact with the face of a very angry looking man in my window's reflection. I screamed and turned to look to see if there was a man, but there wasn't. When I turned back, there was no reflection anymore, but my closet door suddenly opened and all of my clothes fell out. Now, it might be important to mention that my closet actually only closes when I lock it with a key, which I always do, otherwise my closet would just be open. I ran out of my room and down to my parents in a panic. My father came to check, but there was nothing there. He did scold me for making a mess, even though it wasn't my fault. And after that, I never partied in my room ever again. I'm so fully convinced that we have a house ghost. We named him Waldemar, as every time something strange and unexplainable happened, we would blame it on him. We have one of those blinds in the kitchen that you have to pull down and it snaps back up when you unlock it. We now only close that blind after 8 p.m, because if we were to close it sooner, it would always snap back. It doesn't matter how many times we tried, it would always snap back, but after 8 p.m, it would stay down. We started calling it Waldemar's bedtime. I also hear footsteps on our wooden stairs. I know that wood moves depending on the temperature and usage, but I also know what footsteps sound like, and those are definitely footsteps. The only thing is, no one would stand there after the top step was reached. Another experience I keep having when I go abroad always happens in Edinburgh in Scotland. I think I might have adopted a ghost. Every time I'm in Edinburgh, I have this sweet little girl that follows me. She doesn't talk, she doesn't even do much, she's just always by my side. I'm not sure if it is Annie from the Mary King's Close, but I do know that it started there. When I visited Edinburgh alone for the first time, I went on every possible ghost tour there was. One of the tours I was most excited about was that of Mary King's Close. There's a story of a young girl who was left there as the close was being covered up and died. When they opened up the close again, the workers felt uneasy and kept seeing a little girl, only for her to vanish. They called a medium, and the medium said that there was indeed a little girl named Annie, and that Annie missed her dolly. So the medium went to the closest tourist shop and got her a little Highland Barbie, which made Annie happy. Now visitors usually bring plushies to Annie's room, and there's a huge pile with toys and plushies. Another medium was called when the pile started getting too big, and she asked Annie if they were allowed to donate some toys to children's hospitals, and she agreed. People still bring her toys and plushies, and that's what I did. As soon as I set the little cow plushie down, I felt a little tug at my shirt. I turned to see a girl standing there and I smiled, stepping aside to give her some space, should she want to put a toy on the pile as well. Only the little girl didn't look right when I looked at her for a second time. She was pale and wearing an old-timey dress and was sort of not there. I decided to just stand there and listen to the tour guide when the girl stood next to me and took my hand. It felt cold, but I didn't feel pressure, not like when you hold somebody's hand. Once we left the room, the girl was gone, but she kept reappearing over time while I was in Edinburgh. One night I was sitting in bed and I decided to find out who it was, as I always felt her energy with me, so I called out, "Annie, is that you?" Nothing. "Annie, if it is you, please make yourself known." Nothing again. "I'm not mad at you, it's okay." Nothing. But when I went to sleep, she was in my dream. She was just standing there next to me as I was in bed watching. It wasn't creepy and it wasn't uncomfortable, so I allowed Annie to stay. Now, every time I'm in Edinburgh, I visit Mary King's Close and leave a toy for Annie. And every time I'm in Edinburgh, I have this little girl ghost by my side. I think she feels safe with me. Maybe I remind her of someone, but I'm glad I can be a safe space, not only for the living but also for the dead. As always, it is incredibly lovely to think that our deceased loved ones act as guardian spirits for us. It seems that you were indeed a creepy child, laughing and giggling at night time and such. However, I will say that if I was a parent, I'd take the creepy child if they were actually going to sleep easily. I'd be like, listen, this is fine. This is fine. I think it's really interesting that you met this medium, and that this medium helped you to, use meditation to understand your gifts and to learn tarot and bone divination, and like those things are really interesting. And I think that in the world of tarot, there is also the fact that tarot is very mindfulness. It can really help you to think about what you want, where you are in life, what you would like to achieve, Sometimes I get Sinead from the Poisoner's Cabinet to do my tarot, and I find it a very mindful practice, and it really makes you stop and just take stock of things. So I think, tarot is a very useful tool. I've never had any bone divination done. That's pretty cool. And I do think it's really interesting that your medium guided you through these meditations, and obviously you had that positive meditation with your grandmother's deceased partner, and that's a beautiful thing, to be able to have that moment with somebody after they've passed. The girl from the Ring, however, being in your guided meditation, not good. Running down a Victorian hallway, not good. It's interesting to me that when you were kind of resurfaced from this meditation, that the medium said, listen, she's not dangerous, it's fine. How did she know what was happening in your meditation? Does that mean that this Samara from the Ring entity comes up regularly in these kind of meditations for certain people? Like, what does that mean? Is this entity a bad entity, or is it just an entity that is desperate to be seen and known? And this is something that I think a lot about mediumship, moving on to your story about meeting this woman and realising that her husband had died by suicide. I feel like with mediums, there is a lot of weight of responsibility about what you tell people, what you don't tell people, what you present to people, what you don't present to people. And I'm glad for your sake that the medium was there with you to be like a support and a help, and to be able to guide you, because that must have been incredibly emotional. And I love it when people have haunted houses and the ghost gets named, right? First of all, I also love it that you're in a chocolate factory part of town. Brilliant. I love it. And Swiss chocolate is divine. But Voldemar is a great name for a ghost. And I can only presume that it was Voldemar that was in your window's reflection during your little dance party. Presumably that's the same ghost, right? That's, snapping up the blinds and footsteps on the stairs. And I respect somebody who has a strict 8 p.m. bedtime, because that's good. That's good sleep hygiene. And I'm going to be doing another episode on Edinburgh pretty soon, because there's obviously so much ghostly shit that happens in Edinburgh. And I'll have to look up this story of Annie from Mary King's Close. It sounds really fascinating. And listen, maybe you are just a beacon for the dead, and that, you are, like you said, able to bring comfort to both the living and the dead, which is a beautiful thing when you're not freaked out by it. If you were going through your life absolutely petrified, it would be a very different situation. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Heiðdís, Jennine and Baerna for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from the 12th of March 2025. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
Now at Verizon, we have some big news for your peace of mind. For all our customers, existing and new, we're locking in low prices for 3 years guaranteed on My Plan and My Home. That's future you peace of mind. And everyone can save on a brand new phone on My Plan when you trade in any phone from one of our top brands. That's new phone peace of mind. Because at Verizon, whether you're already a customer or you're just joining us, we got you. Visit Verizon today. Price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.